This single company wiped out 1/3 of Canada's stock market. And the craziest part? It all started with a fake accounting trick. Imagine a corporation so massive that its financial health dictates the economic destiny of an entire G7 nation. A company whose stock certificate was treated as a safer bet than government bonds. In the late 1990s, Nortel Networks was not just a successful business, it was the crown jewel of Canada's technological empire. At its absolute zenith, the company was valued at nearly $400 billion. To put that into perspective, Nortel alone accounted for a staggering 35% of the entire Toronto Stock Exchange. If you had a retirement fund, a pension plan, or mutual funds in Canada, your financial future was directly tied to this telecommunications behemoth. But in a terrifyingly short span of time, this global titan evaporated, leaving behind a trail of ruined lives, empty offices, and shattered retirement dreams. To understand how a tech empire of this scale could completely vanish, we have to travel back to the mid-1990s, when the internet was first transitioning from a niche academic tool into a global phenomenon. The world was suddenly hungry for bandwidth. Data traffic was doubling every few months, and existing copper telephone lines simply could not handle the load. The planet needed physical infrastructure to carry billions of gigabytes of data across oceans and continents. Nortel had the perfect solution. They were pioneers in fiber optic technology, creating hardware that could transmit light through glass strands at speeds never seen before. They were the plumbers of the digital age, and they were selling the only heavy-duty pipes that actually worked. At the helm of this skyrocketing rocket ship was John Roth, a brilliant engineer who ascended to the role of CEO in 1997. Roth was hailed as a corporate savior, a visionary who understood that physical hardware was only half the battle. To keep the stock price climbing to the heavens, Roth initiated one of the most aggressive and reckless acquisition sprees in corporate history. Nortel began buying up internet startups at astronomical valuations. They purchased Bay Networks for $9 billion. They bought Terra for over $3 billion. They acquired Shasta Networks, Clarify, and Alteon. But there was a critical, dangerous catch to these transactions. Nortel was not paying for these acquisitions with cold, hard cash. Instead, they were paying with their own highly inflated stock. During the height of the bubble, this loop worked flawlessly. The more acquisitions Nortel announced, the higher its stock price climbed, which in turn gave them more financial ammunition to buy even more companies. Wall Street analysts could not praise John Roth enough. He was featured on the covers of major business magazines, and employees felt like they were working at the center of the universe. But behind this dazzling curtain of continuous growth, a fatal vulnerability was quietly festering. Most of the startups Nortel had purchased were not generating any real revenue, let alone profit. They were highly speculative bets on a digital future that was still years away. Worse yet, Nortel's core business model assumed that telecom service providers would continue to borrow and spend billions of dollars every year to upgrade their networks. But by the year 2000, those service providers were drowning in debt. They had overbuilt their networks, laying millions of miles of dark fiber optic cable that sat completely unused. The market was completely saturated. When the calendar flipped to the year 2000, the music suddenly stopped. The dot-com bubble burst. Almost overnight, high-flying internet startups declared bankruptcy. Major telecommunications carriers slashed their capital expenditures to zero. Nortel's sales pipeline evaporated in an instant. Nobody wanted to buy fiber optic equipment anymore. The company was suddenly saddled with tens of billions of dollars in overvalued assets, unpaid customer bills, and warehouses full of useless, unsellable inventory. But wait. It gets worse. Instead of honestly admitting that the market had fundamentally shifted and that the boom times were over, Nortel's leadership chose a deceptive path that would seal their doom. John Roth quietly stepped down as CEO in 2001, walking away with over $135 million in stock options and salary, just before the public realized the ship was rapidly taking on water. He was replaced by Frank Dunn, the company's former chief financial officer. Dunn inherited a financial nightmare. The stock was in freefall, plummeting from its peak of $124 per share down to single digits. To salvage the stock price and secure massive personal bonuses, Dunn and his executive team devised a complex, highly illegal accounting scheme. First, they engaged in what are known as bill and hold transactions. They manufactured large telecom systems, packed them into boxes, and moved them to their own off-site storage facilities, while recording them on the books as completed sales to customers who had neither paid for them nor requested delivery. Second, they manipulated their financial reserves. During the initial crash, Nortel wrote off billions of dollars in restructuring costs. But Dunn purposely over-reserved, setting aside far more money for liabilities than was actually necessary. In subsequent quarters, when the company desperately needed to show a profit to trigger executive bonuses, they would simply release these cookie jar reserves back into the income statement, transforming massive operational losses into artificial profits. The deception worked perfectly on paper. In early 2003, Nortel miraculously announced a profitable quarter, shocking the market. The board of directors was thrilled, believing that Frank Dunn had pulled off the greatest turnaround in tech history. Because the company had met its profitability targets, Dunn and his top executives triggered over $70 million in cash bonuses. They had literally manufactured profits out of thin air to enrich themselves while the company was structurally dying. But you cannot hide a multi-billion-dollar lie forever. External auditors and regulatory agencies eventually began to notice massive, unexplainable discrepancies in Nortel's financial reporting. In 2004, the house of cards collapsed. Frank Dunn and his closest financial associates were publicly fired for gross financial misconduct. The company was forced to restate its financial results multiple times, wiping out the fake profits and revealing that the company had actually been bleeding billions of dollars in cash. The psychological blow to the market was absolute. Investors realized they could no longer trust a single word or number published by Nortel. The stock crashed to mere pennies, wiping out hundreds of billions of dollars in shareholder wealth. Over 90,000 loyal employees were laid off in devastating waves. Entire towns that relied on Nortel offices were turned into ghost towns. The government launched intense criminal investigations. Top executives stood in court. The public demanded justice. Decades of legendary engineering were completely erased. The employee pension fund collapsed. Tens of thousands of retirees lost their health benefits. Their retirement payouts were slashed by up to 30%. The executives kept their massive historic payouts. The criminal trials dragged on for nearly a decade. Ultimately, the executives were acquitted of criminal fraud on a technicality, leaving the victims with absolutely nothing. In January 2009, Nortel officially filed for bankruptcy protection. It was the largest and most complex corporate liquidation in Canadian history. There was no saving the company. Instead, Nortel was chopped up and sold off to its global competitors piece by piece. Its invaluable patent portfolio, containing the foundational technologies for modern 4G and LTE mobile networks, was sold in a historic auction for $4.5 billion to a consortium of tech giants including Apple, Microsoft, and Google. The fall of Nortel is more than just a story of a business failing. It is a stark warning of what happens when financial engineering replaces real engineering, and when short-term greed is allowed to destroy decades of human innovation. If this systemic corporate greed shocked you, you must watch our video on how Enron erased $74 billion in just 24 days, using the exact same dark accounting tricks to fool the world before it all came crashing down.